Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to podcast. Today's guest, Eric Hassel. I'm super excited to pick your brain. In fact, we were just chatting a little bit off camera, and I've already gotten to know you a little bit better just now with, your background in the fire service, your experience as a Navy veteran. So thank you for that service, by the way. But mostly what I'm stoked to talk to you about is, lots of things, but kind of your training and coaching mindset and mentality. Yeah. But you're an ISSA Certified Strength and Conditioning coach. You're CrossFit level 1. You've also got your Kettlebell RX, and then I believe it's ISSA bodybuilding as well, right?
Yep.
So you've been doing personal training now for how long?
I've been coaching group classes and athletes for about 10 years, and then individual clients just kind of started that up, and that's fun too, just being one-on-one with people versus the whole group. You're trying to work with this person, and you're like, oh, I got 8 other people over here I got to talk to as well. So getting that one-on-one focus has been fun, and then just seeing where people are at in their different journeys. I've got a young guy in his 30s, and then the other guys are in their 70s.
Right.
And seeing just the difference in those guys, where they've come from, what their philosophies are, and if they kept moving, how well they move or how well they don't.
Tell me about that. Well, and before we don't go there, because I want to hear about that too, that idea of continual movement.
Yeah.
So remind me to go back to that.
Yeah.
But before we do, just paint a little bit of the background. Tell me about how you got started down this path to begin with. Walk me through the backstory.
So,
give me the
way back.
Give me the.
So
origin.
It was way back. The fire departments had just consolidated. I started with Hermosa Cliff as a junior firefighter when I was 16. They consolidated. I got on as a reservist with Durango and was doing shifts at the city station downtown, and we did a fitness test, and I did horrible. I was like, I'm freaking 18 years old. I should rock this. I just did horrible. This was not good. So I got into that, started running on the treadmill, started lifting with a lot of those guys, and then started doing the combat challenge and started being a part of that team and competing in that.
Right.
Kind of got me into it. And it was, my biggest thing always was running was hard. So I just went one day, I actually lived at Station 14 up by Tamaron.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm just going to run up to Purgatory. Just do it. And I just ran that whole way. And then I was like, oh, I can do that. And now, I don't know. After that, running kind of came easy to me, I guess. I just forced myself through it, broke through that. And then ever since then, I've kind of been into it. When I was in the Navy, did a lot with the command PT. Went in to do aircrew rescue swimmer, actually ended up messing up my shoulder, and so didn't get to finish that program, unfortunately, but got into being a Navy gunner's mate. So we work on all the weapons systems, small arms. So I worked on everything from the 9mm to the big 5-inch gun and missile launchers and everything in between. And
right.
So that was really fun. And then training everybody on the ship. We do range days underway where we'd go out and shoot at targets, and we do move and shoots, and it was really fun stuff. So kind of always been into that training, physical training, mental training.
Kind of that physical training and I don't know, I'll call it improvement. Category. Yeah. Did you play sports in high school, or where did the athletic side of things get involved, or was it through the military? Is that
it was through kind of through skiing. So I grew up here, lived just not even a mile from Purgatory. And my dad worked up there for a long time, ran the race department. So I grew up skiing since I was 2, racing. Got a chance to ski with a lot of pro ski racers and U.S. ski team, and had a lot of cool opportunities there. And so only recently have I kind of found how all that experience translated into everything else. And it was more mental than really the physical.
Yeah.
Where you just, you drop in on something steep and you just go for it and you feel it. And I'm like, oh, I get that now.
Right.
I feel that in other things too, where you just kind of let go and you just go for it.
And let it
flow. Yeah, you get in that flow state and you're just going. And I'm like, oh, that's where that came from.
Isn't that funny?
That took me, it took me till last winter to figure that out.
It's so funny, what it takes to have the benefit of hindsight.
Yeah.
So, and then your time in the Navy, it sounds like obviously there, you must have learned so much with being in the Navy for so long. But you had mentioned a little bit there that's kind of when the physical training, I'll call it more formal physical training, kind of entered your life. Talk to me about
picked
that.
Up. We did so boot camp I got in really good shape before I went there, and coming from Colorado, going to basically sea level in Illinois, the running was no problem. Push-ups, pull-ups, sit-ups, none of that was a problem. Then we went down to Pensacola, Florida for Aircrew Rescue Swimmer School, and that is a lot of swimming, a lot of push-ups, a lot of pull-ups, and a high attrition rate. I think it's like third to Buds and like EOD. And
no way.
Yeah. The attrition rate in our class was so much that when I went back to Great Lakes and was at Gunner's Mate School, they actually started sending up aircrew instructors up there to help kind of build up guys that were coming into the program. Oh yeah, it was incredibly high. I think it was 60% or greater of the class. Yeah.
Tell me more about that. Why do you think it was so high?
It was a lot of shoulders. Just everybody's shoulders were not up for the volume. Now, knowing what I know now, if I'd have known it back then, I could have prepared better. But the volume of laps in the pool we would do, because we would go in the morning, do PT out on the field, then we'd go get in the pool with Aircrew School, and we'd swim, laps around the edge just continuously because we were building up for a mile swim. Then we'd put flight suits on and flight gear, do some more swimming, jump off the tower, tons of swimming. Then you'd go do some more PT. A lot of push-ups, a lot of pull-ups. We'd go do some classroom time, try to stay awake. And then those that were going to rescue swimmer school would go to rescue swimmer build-up, which was just getting in the pool and lap, over
and over.
Lap.
Yeah.
And so, out of all the guys that I ended up going on with, out of there, everybody had a shoulder injury in one way or another.
Yeah.
Dislocated shoulders, shoulder tears, all kinds of just a lot of shoulder issues. And I'm like, if I'd have known then what I know now. But then,
could have trained for it.
I would have known what I needed to train more for. I did the running and had the cardio down. Like we'd go on long beach runs or something, and there was two of us from Colorado, and we're like, oh, this is easy. And then we get in the pool, and I'm like, oh, this is really hard. I should have done a lot more of this.
More of that, yeah. Well, and of course, who would have thought going into that though that you need to have strong shoulders?
Yeah. I had I've never done anything like that, so I had no idea that was where the weak link was going to be. But
did you ever think about quitting?
Sometimes, it's tough. They push you pretty hard. We'd do 10 push-ups, 3 pull-ups, 10 push, but it wasn't just 10 push-ups and 3 pull-ups. It was like one push-up would be halfway down, all the way down, halfway up, back down, all the way up, 1.
Right.
And same thing on the pull-up bar. Yeah. And so in those times,
it's like
you're
30
like,
push-ups.
Oh my God, but you're like, well, they can't kill me, so I'll just keep going.
Right.
But then when you get injured, you don't get a choice.
Then you're done. Yeah.
Yeah.
Walk me through that, because I'm fascinated with that, knowing that, Well, and it sounds like, obviously I'm excited to pick your brain about all the physical fitness stuff and personal training and the coaching and all those things you do. But I also think it's fascinating. I love hearing how people got there. And it seems like the military experience, obviously you weren't going into it thinking like this is a physical training endeavor. We're there for other reasons, but this is a huge
piece
part of it.
Yeah.
Talk to me about what that taught you, or like how it changed your mindset and your approach, knowing how involved the physical fitness and physical training components were of your time in the military.
Yeah, just that part when you go into those programs just kind of blows your minds of how far you can get pushed for something.
Yeah.
Because I've done wildland fires and done
which is
24. Yeah, which is really hard. We did 24 hours on the Edgemont fire. I was working with a guy who was a Navy SEAL in the first Gulf War, and we were out there for 24 hours. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm keeping up with him. This is hard. Like, oh yeah. We went to Mesa Verde. We were on night shift there. Did a lot of days on Missionary Ridge Fire up there in the high country, and I'm like, oh yeah, I can do hard. It's just that's a more drawn out, like you got downtime in between where you get in those programs, and it's like, oh, we're going to kick your ass all the time, and you're going to be in here, and we are just going to be on you all the time. And it was, it wasn't always just the physical things. They were always stressing you, which makes sense for the jobs you're going into. You need the stress. Like, you'd come into an office like this, and it was where the instructors were, but there was walls everywhere, and there was a set of footprints, and I swear they moved them around. You had to find that set of footprints before you could talk to anybody. And so just like little stuff like that.
Right.
all the time.
Yeah, like
just kind of little mind games.
Intentionally making it more challenging.
Yeah.
How did you get through it? What was your mindset like? Like, especially those early days, like the training.
You're just kind of terrified.
Yeah.
You're like, I better just do exactly what needs to be done. And then you find the humor in it. So we kind of example that. So our rooms, about the size of this was our room. 3 of us were in there. You had to keep it spotless. They'd come in and inspect it. So we wanted to do really good. So somebody had the great idea we were going to polish the tile in the bathroom with Pledge, which it looked great until one of the instructors, and we're standing out in the hallway at attention, and he goes in and just slips and falls right on his ass, cussing, yelling, screaming, comes out, and meanwhile they turned our whole room upside down, and we're just standing there like the most hilarious, and you could tell all the other instructors were trying to keep from laughing. Yeah, trying not to laugh, and he was just so pissed. And it's those little things that you remember those.
Right.
But yeah, you kind of find the humor in all those things, and they're now I realize they were having a lot of fun doing all that stuff.
Right. Yeah.
Too.
They're on the other side of it.
Yeah. You're like, oh, they were kind of having fun doing that a little bit. Like
it's
they weren't really that mean. They were just trying to keep us on edge at all the time.
Right. Which is very intentional. Yeah. Very purposeful.
Yeah.
Do you have kids?
I do. I have 3 kids.
How old are your kids?
So I have 10, 17, and 19.
Awesome. So mine I've got 3 as well, 6, 4, and 2. And I was just thinking how funny it is because sometimes, like your story reminded me, sometimes they'll do stuff that I know I have to get mad at them for, even though I think it's funny.
Yeah. And you're trying not to laugh.
I have to parent, that was actually really funny type of thing,
Yep, exactly, yeah. So you find those moments, and then just those relationships you build with all the people you're in there with. Like, you don't want to let them down. You want to all finish together. You want to get through there together. So it's those kind of, that like trauma bond.
Yeah, it keeps you going.
Yeah.
And you were talking a little bit about the high attrition rate there.
Yeah.
What was that like? Like, you're seeing guys drop. They're
seeing, there and they're gone.
Yeah.
And I mean, there were some guys that just dropped day one. They'd get in there. We'd go out and do a PT session, and you're in Pensacola, Florida, and it's 100% humidity and super hot out, and your shirt is just completely soaked, stuck to you, and that's just on the field PT. And there were guys, that just quit then. Yeah, we didn't have a bell or anything, but guys that just drop out or somebody get hurt. The worst it'd be is we had a couple people had stuff happen in the pool. One guy kind of like, I've never really heard what actually they determined it was, if it was a seizure or what, but he just went like this and like froze up and like sank to the bottom of the pool, like passed out or something, and they had to dive in and get him out. So that kind of messes with you. You're like, oh, that changes the whole view of the day. Or we'd go out in PT and all of a sudden we're running back and you see it's black flag conditions, and now all of a sudden somebody's having heat stroke or something going on. So
because I would imagine, like, my frame of reference, and it's nowhere near the same, but when I run ultras, you want to kind of like be around. I try to be a cheerleader. Yeah. Like and when I'm wildland firefighting, also it's interesting. Yeah. Somehow I've gotten lucky where when things get really tough, I get like pumped up. Like I do better when things get hard. I start to bring humor or excitement to it or whatever. Like when I'm running ultras, I'm like the cheerleader. And I'll just pump everyone up because it helps me keep going. But you got to be careful about it, because if you're watching, like if somebody else drops or takes too long at an aid station or
and you've been helping them,
it's easy to think like, oh, maybe
I should have tried harder.
Or maybe I should too, or whatever. So I'm curious, like, what that was like. That balance of, you've got the camaraderie and you're sticking around for the other guys, but you're also watching.
It's tough to see somebody get hurt or somebody leave, and you're like, no, you're like, you can do it. And it's you can see it in their eyes, and I'm sure you've seen it on those runs. It's like just their eyes are just kind of like, they're
there's
done.
Nothing you can do.
You're not going to convince them that, hey, you can stick this out. It's just it's just done.
Do you think that most of that comes down to mental strength or physical strength, or both?
I think it's a lot of mental strength. We had some big physical dudes that you're like, oh, he's got it, and then he wouldn't have it, and you'd see some other guy, and you're like, that guy's kind of squirrely, like, and he'd something in his brain just is the right kind of crazy that he's no problem. Gets through it just fine. So
I guess it's interesting you say that, because that's one thing I've found fascinating about ultras is that body types like don't matter at all.
No.
Like you'll see like the guy that's like the athlete. You
Yeah.
know, and you're thinking, oh, they're going to crush it.
Yeah.
And they're,
they're not. They're crushed.
Or the old lady that just smokes you.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
My dad crews me a lot, and he'll give me a hard time. He's like, that lady's smoking you. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I know.
Yeah. Yep.
She's
Yep.
way tougher than I am.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's interesting that, like, I don't know, that the physical appearance or the body type doesn't necessarily mean,
Nope.
you know, how they're going to do in the challenge.
Yeah, and even, you know, what was crazy is one guy that I was in boot camp with that we went to air crew school together, and you see him in the pool and you're like, oh my God, he looks like a bear that's trying to keep from drowning. How's he going to make it? And he makes it.
And he makes it, no problem.
Yeah. And you're like, that doesn't make any sense, but it's just they got that
The
switch
mindset.
in there or just enough of something that, you know, they can keep it going through there. So
Were there parts of, whether it was firefighting, your experience firefighting or your time in the military, that taught you how to flip that switch mentally? And I'm curious if you've been able to apply that, you know, with your coaching hat on.
Oh, yeah.
You know, when you're whether it's individual or groups or whatever.
Yeah.
But I have to imagine that there's, you know, the decade of experience either in the fire service or the Navy.
Yeah.
Talk me through that. Is there, like, have you?
Yeah, I mean,
or have you always had that?
I've kind of always had it for myself, but it's always hard to get somebody else to see what you mean by that. Like describing what we were talking about earlier. Like last year when I figured out what I was actually doing and didn't know that's what I've been doing this whole time, I was talking to my dad because we actually raced the Dave Spencer last year, and it was my second day skiing. Went up, had super fast time, probably one of the fastest times I'd ever had, and I'm like, this is my first run on my second day skiing all year. That's so weird. And he's like, you've always had that where you can just drop in and you just go on. He's like, one time I think we were at Vail, and he's like, we're at the top of this run and there's this giant drop off. You got to drop down. And he's like, you just dropped off into below the clouds. And he's like, well, I guess I got to go too. And he's like, and you just dropped in and you didn't even look like you thought about it. And I was like, well, I didn't really think about it. And then I was like, oh, that's it.
That's the point.
I was like, that's the point. And I found that with a lot of stuff, like doing a lot of the CrossFit workouts, doing the CrossFit Open. I did strongman competitions, and you just have that, like, before you kind of have that, like, jitters and everything. And I found, you know, before I start into one of those, I just kind of get calm. You see people like fidgeting around or they're doing like extra warm up, and I'm just like, come on, let's go.
You're just
and
ready.
then I just turn the mind off and just go. And I'm like, oh, that's what that is.
Right.
But to try and explain that to somebody else and get them into that to see how to do it, I haven't quite figured that out.
Yeah, I mean, that's the tough thing. So do you think that that's something you learned, or do you think that that's something you've always had, that ability?
Yeah, I think I've just had it. I don't know how you would, maybe just from skiing, you know, from the time I was 2 and just being around such high-level skiers all that time and just being like, oh, I just better keep up.
Right.
You know, some of the best runs I can ever remember was some of the big pros out of Europe and skiing down the front side of Purgatory.
And you're just trying to keep up.
And just trying to hang on. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's one of those moments where I established that I could just like shut it off and was just like, okay, keeping up with those guys. That's where we're going.
Right. Yeah.
And just did it. So I think maybe that helped learn it. You know,
Yeah.
heard like surfers talk about it before. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's what it feels like.
Right. Yeah,
I'm
like being fully, you know, it's interesting because I experience the same thing, I think, especially when I'm doing, I think you've seen me at the gym. I Murph every Monday.
Yeah.
And there's so many times when I'm like, this is the last thing I want to do.
Yeah.
But once I do, I'm doing it.
Yeah, once you start,
you know
yeah.
what I mean? Like,
yeah. Once you start that first mile, you're like,
the decision's made.
Don't think anymore.
Yeah, I have to do it.
Yeah.
But, you know, Murphing's interesting. I'm curious your take on it, actually. I've been Murphing every Monday since 2020, at least once a week.
Yeah.
Sometimes I Murph on Fridays too, but every Monday.
Yeah.
And most of the time I do it weighted. Sometimes I don't, but I Murph every Monday.
Yeah.
It has never gotten easier.
No.
Why?
No. Just because it's hard.
It's just, tell me the science behind
It's just hard. No, because there's just so much different components to that. Depends on your recovery. How you run that first mile affects how your push-ups and pull-ups go. I tried it one time. So it's, you do the push-ups, pull-ups, air squats. What did I do? Did I do it? Yeah, I did it backwards. So I did the mile, and then I did all the air squats as soon as I got back from the first mile. And then it was just push-ups and pull-ups. So by the time I went out on that second mile, all I'd done was go from the push-up position to the pull-up bar
Yeah.
for the last like 20 minutes or whatever. So my legs after those 300 air squats were just blocked. So that second mile was the hardest mile I have ever run in my life. I was like, well, that was I was like, oh, I'm just going to knock the air squats out. I can throw out 300 air squats. I did. Yeah, I did. And then my legs just slowly went
locked up.
Yeah, and I started out on that mile and I was like, oh no.
Don't tell anyone, but I cheat a little bit. I run 1.25 miles at the beginning.
Yeah.
Because it's a psychological trick actually. Yeah. One time I did it on accident.
Yeah.
Because I leave here, I run past the gym.
Yeah.
I run back, do the squats, push-ups, pull-ups. And one time I accidentally ran extra.
Yeah.
And then I was like, ooh, it's kind of nice.
You're like, oh,
psychologically, I'm like,
yeah, you're like, I only have 3/4 of a mile left. Yeah.
So it's
yeah. Don't do it the other way. No. I would not advise that. Yeah, I was like, that is the hardest mile I've ever run.
It's funny. Yeah. And it's interesting because I tell people all the time, I'm like, I'm not kidding though. It does not get easier.
Yeah. Well, it's like,
I've done it a couple hundred times.
Yeah. It's like the assault bike.
Yeah.
The better you get at it, the faster you move, the harder it gets again.
That's the problem.
So you get better at it, but then it's still hard. So the faster you move, you just gradually make it harder as you're faster at it.
That's probably it. You're doing it slightly faster.
Because that's the thing. Like with the rower, you can get better to a point where you're efficient and it gets easier and it's efficient. You're more efficient pulling calories and meters.
Right.
On the air bike, the harder you push, the more resistance you get. The harder it gets. The harder you push, the harder it gets. And it just never.
Cycles,
there's never a like, oh wow, the assault bike was really easy today.
From a personal training or like from your expertise perspective on that, I'm curious. Is there benefit to those types of exercises that don't get easier?
Yeah.
Like we were talking off camera a little bit about I forget how you worded it, but your bench.
Our bench search. So banded last Monday we did banded bench press. So you basically lay on one of like the green bands, put it in your hands, and so the idea is it's lighter at the bottom and then it's heavier as you get to the top. And so what that does is that band trains that speed strength, so you have to keep accelerating the whole way.
Oh, right.
If you're just benching a straight bar, you're going to accelerate it and then you're going to start to decelerate. But if you have that band on, you have to accelerate the whole way through because it progressively gets heavier.
It's harder and harder.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So with the assault bike, I listen to a lot of podcasts about training while I'm driving back and forth to work because we live out towards Bayfield and I work at Purgatory. So
you got to commute.
Plenty of time to listen to training philosophy and things. But they were talking about using the assault bike for like mental training and just getting on the assault bike and using that and doing it like an EMOM. So you do like 1 minute hard, 1 minute rest, or you could start off with 15 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, and just doing that hard pace. And that just helps you train to just get that hard pace, easy, hard pace, easy.
Right.
Or you can take it to the next level where you pick a pace that's challenging and you just try to stay at that pace. You're like, okay, 67 RPMs. I'm just going to sit right there. What becomes challenging is minute 3. Either your brain, if you're like a type A personality, you want to start speeding up.
Yeah.
For some reason at minute 3, you're like, I'm going to go faster. And then if you're like a little more laid back, you're like, well, I'm just going to slow down a little bit. And so you can watch people. I try to speed up at minute 3. I'm like, oh, I got to sit and I look down and I'm like, every time.
Yeah.
It's
always at minute 3.
Yeah, it's like right around minute 3, you're like, oh, I'm going to speed up and push harder, which makes no sense because you're going for like 9 or 12 minutes.
Right.
So you're like, I'm not going to make the clock go any faster by speeding up. But that's one of those where you can just train that mental capacity to get to that range, and you either deregulate yourself to stay there, or you regulate yourself to stay at that whatever RPMs it is. And you just pick a pace that's sustainable that you could do for 9 or 12 minutes solid. But yeah, you find that right around minute 3, you either want to go faster or slower. And it could be depending on how you feel that day too. But you just got to stick right there. So that one's cool for that, because you can get that kind of mental piece of like, nope, this is where I got to stay.
This is the level, yeah.
And it's easy on there because you got the screen right here. You don't have to like check your watch or see where your heart rate is. You're like right there. Yeah.
Walk me through, because I want to transition a little bit to your approach to coaching and training and wearing your professional hat for a minute. But one of the things I'm curious about is like we're talking a little bit about the power of the mind and the the power of the body. walk me through how you coach people through that. Like, let's say, for example, on the bike, and I got to maintain that, and I theoretically, let's say I'm your student, and at mile 3 I tank every time.
Yeah.
What are you telling me? Like, what are the things you're telling your students and your clients from a mental perspective to like keep those things going or to keep it going through?
I kind of try and explain what we're trying to train there. You know, in any given scenario, why are we doing banded bench press? Why are we doing this on the bike? What system are we training? We've been doing brought in a lot of like creatine phosphate training stuff right now. So that first like 7 seconds of any max effort lift, max effort throw, whatever it is, and trying to train that. And so I don't know if you saw the post on the EMOM we did the other day. It was pretty rough for everybody apparently. Yeah. So I kind of explained, hey, this is what we're trying to do here. You work hard for 1 minute, you get a minute rest. And you can see people they kind of go to their place.
Right.
They go to their place. Usually they find it. So you got to, kind of help people find that spot where, hey, we're trying to stay right here because this is the area we're trying to train in. We're not trying to go all out. We're not trying to just fade off and cruise through and just kind of like get a little light cardio in. We're going a little more intense, but we're trying to train our minds to be able to stay at that intensity. So when we do these other long effort workouts or these high intensity EMOMs or AMRAPs, we can keep that same intensity the whole time.
Right. Yeah. Do people come to you from a client perspective? Generally speaking, walk me through that. Like, what problems people are trying to solve, or why people are coming to you? Because you mentioned earlier that it's a pretty wide variety.
Yeah, but everybody kind of has the same, like they want to move better. They want to get stronger. They want to improve somewhere. A lot of guys have just kind of let things go. They used to play sports or used to run or whatever they did before, and they're just kind of like, I kind of let it go, or they had an injury, had surgery, and trying to get back from that. So that's a lot of the people we see, and then a lot of times it's convincing people that we do need a little higher intensity. We don't need this just going through the motions, sitting on machines, kind of making ourselves feel like we're training. And that's kind of one of the things I work on a lot is like, hey, we need some intensity in our training. We can't just show up and like, oh, we came in, we did a few sets, got my training for the week, I'm out.
Talk to me about that. What's the difference between, what training?
Yeah.
Because you're using that word, I think, intentionally. Like,
yes.
Define that for me. Like, what is training as opposed to that example you said of, kind of coming in and doing a few sets.
I think training implies there's a specific goal at the end. You're not just checking a box in your day of, I got my workout in. Training is you want to improve your bench. You want to improve your squat. You want to improve the strength of your knee that just had surgery on it. You want to just improve your overall fitness. You're getting ready for, whatever it is that you have coming up. You have some goal in mind, where working out to me is you're just working out.
Right.
You're just kind of going in and working out. When I was stationed in Pascagoula, I had a bunch of buddies and we were kind of into bodybuilding, and we would just go in and just work out. And we would do all kinds of different stuff here and there, and we'd hit that, and we'd hit that machine. We'd do some bench press, some squats, but we weren't really training. We didn't really have a goal in mind. We were just we had a lot of time, so we would just go in and work out.
Right.
And it wasn't really focused. There was no program behind it. It was just kind of just bros working out.
Yeah. If you had to, and it's probably hard to measure, but I'm curious from your perspective, like from I'll call it an impact perspective, or like a benefit, right?
Yeah.
So you have, let's say our baseline is no exercise.
Yeah.
And then we have working out.
Yeah.
Or the person that goes to the gym 3 times a week and, I don't know, does some machines or whatever.
Yeah.
But they're working out. They're there. They're working out. And then you have training for a goal. How would you describe the differences between in results or like benefits? Yeah. Because I'm curious kind of like, what I'm trying to get at from that too is, I think a lot of people think that they're training or maybe not, and are just working out. Yeah. But obviously, we want everybody to see results.
Yeah.
We want everyone to feel better and
continuously see results. I think that's where that continuum changes.
Is that the line?
Is if you're not doing anything, you're not going to see any positive results. But as you start to do things, especially as a beginner, you're going to see results right away. Just driving to the gym and walking inside and doing anything, you're going to see huge results. But continuing to see results, and that's where we always hit that snag, is people come in, they get started, they see some results, they keep doing the same thing, and then their progress just plateaus. And they're just here, and they're like, what am I coming here for? And they're like, I'm out, because there's no specific focus on what's next or changing that program up. Where training, you have that different parts of your program that you kind of continuously change up. So coming from the CrossFit world, it's always constantly varied, that whole deal.
Yeah.
But also bringing in a little bit of like the powerlifting training that I've been exposed to and learned about. The conjugate system is very similar. So
what's the conjugate system?
So conjugate, it's West Side barbell, really strong power lifter type dudes.
Got it.
Out of Ohio. But their system is, you don't just come in and deadlift every day to increase your deadlift. You come in, you might do a max of 3 on the deadlift. You might do on a 2-inch box. You might stand on the box. You might put the plates on the box. You might add chains. You might add bands. You're just getting different maxes, so you're always hitting some kind of new personal best, but it's not always in squat, bench, or deadlift. It's a variation of, so it's kind of that same theory is constantly varied. You're kind of always changing it up. Because if you just go in and you're always doing the same bench press, eventually you're just that's all you're going to get to. So that's where we had the bands, we had the unstable portion, we had chains, we change it up quite a bit. We do it from the floor, take the bench away, do the same thing with squats, box squats, chains, bands, all kinds of fun stuff.
So changing it up doesn't necessarily need to be like adding more weight.
Yeah, no.
It's just adding
different variables.
What's anatomically, like physically, what is that doing? How come that's helping you get over a plateau?
It's not really anatomical. It's the training stimulus changes, so you're not always hitting that same exact movement. And,
right.
With like barbells, you get efficient in that movement. You're going to get efficient in that movement pattern. You have to add some kind of new stimulus or variable in there to get a new bit of progress.
Do something different. Yeah.
So if you go in and you add bands to a deadlift, and all you do is drape one of those green bands over the bar, and then you stand on the bar or stand on the band and then pull, you're going to be like, oh, that is a whole different type of deadlift than just deadlifting. Or if you throw, a couple 2x4s or 2x6 under your feet and you stand on those and then pull, whole different range of motion. And so I kind of got into strongman, because then you get different implements. You have logs that you press, you have stones that you lift, we have a yoke back in our room at the vault there at DFC. And so that yoke is really fun for people, because they'll be like, oh, I can't do that much weight. The yoke, you put it on your back and you can load that thing up with a ton of plates, and people are just amazed at how much weight they can just pick up and stand with. And you're only really lifting it this far. So it's not like a full squat or anything, but they're like, oh, wow, that's really cool. I can move a lot of weight. And that's a different stimulus on your body.
Right. And even a mental win.
Even just picking that weight up and just standing there holding it loads your system, loads your skeleton, loads your central nervous system. And you're like, oh, wow. And gives you a really cool boost, because you're like, wow, that was really
cool. Look how much
I
just did.
You're like, I just lifted up a whole bunch of weight.
Right.
Like, I never thought I could do that.
Yeah, you get the win.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's kind of that big thing with the conjugate system, is you get all those different wins along the way. And then at the end, you come back and you do your regular squat, bench, and deadlift, and you're like, oh, wow, those got better. And I didn't even specifically train that exact movement. I trained variations of.
And so it all added up.
Yeah. So that's kind of a big part of my training philosophy, is we're always kind of changing variables, adding new things in, kettlebells, whatever cool things I can find to bring in. And just keep changing so we keep progressing.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of the one thing I realized that I learned from going into the Navy and Aircrew School, is if we just keep doing those same movements, we're going to end up overdoing some part of our body.
Yeah. And then we get use injuries.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yes.
Chronic use injuries.
Yeah.
Speaking of, actually, I'm curious. So one of the things that I hired Cameron from Durango Fitness Club. He coached me for my first 100 miler, and it was awesome. Just speaking to like the whole idea of a coach and personal training, all that it was wild to see, because I had been running. Yeah. Not even air quotes. I'd been running for a long time at that point. I'd run multiple marathons. I'd run an ultra. Like I had ran. But I kind of always thought that I'd be where I was at. And then I hired a coach,
Yeah.
and he taught me all these things about interval training and strength training, or not strength training, interval training and speed work and like all these different things. And I really saw my running progress go up significantly in several weeks. And then I got injured. But
that happens.
It was cool to see what happened for me once I introduced a coach.
Yeah.
Even though I had been running, for 10 years or so. And then though, I've been always one of those guys, as you know, I host a podcast, and it's because I love getting information from people. And so I started then this next round, I started prioritizing strength training in addition to my running. And I think I'm flirting with figuring out a balance to maintain my strength and help prevent injury. And still improve from a running perspective. But I'm curious your thoughts on that, of like that balance of strength training versus endurance, and like I don't know if there's like an optimal balance. Now the new word hybrid.
I know. Well, here's I heard somebody say it. They're like, aren't you just a regular athlete?
Right.
Because
like if you can't run,
if you can't run and lift, are you really an athlete?
Yeah.
Like, I was like, oh, okay.
But I got to get the search views, We'll say hybrid athlete in the description.
Because that's what because that's what they're looking for, because you got a lot of specific athletes and things. So I don't know. It's a really fine balancing act between the two, because I go back and forth where sometimes I'll get really into running again for a while and run, and then I'm like, am I lifting? And then I'm like, am I running? And as I've gotten heavier over the past 2 years, I'm like, ooh, running is a little different now at this heavier weight. You go up 30 pounds and you're like, ooh, this is big guy running now.
Are you 30 pounds heavier right now than you used to be?
Yeah.
No way.
I was.
Because you're still lean right now.
Yeah. Then I was in the fall of 23. Yeah.
So only in 2 years? Not even 2 years. 18 months.
Yeah. So I did get on TRT in the fall of 23.
Got it.
Working with a local clinic here in Durango, because I'd had it tested through the VA, and it was really low, and they were like, you're within range. And I'm like, okay, kind of. And so found this guy, Sean, here in Durango. Right now he's called Colorado Man Clinic and Elevated Peak Health. He's kind of making a shift to a new deal. You should have him on. He's got cool info,
I would love
too.
a connection,
Yeah, and just kind of all the blood panel stuff you can learn about yourself and see where maybe you need some something, maybe you need some vitamin D, maybe your blood work showing some overtraining, and so I get blood work done a lot. But I went in and saw him, found my testosterone was really low, talked to him about what we could do, got on I'm still on a really low dose of TRT, but just the mental feeling and everything, had really bad migraines as well. And so I think a lot of that is attributed, and there's a lot more research coming out in the veteran community, those of us that have been around like weapons, explosions, lots of head injuries just growing up ski racing as well.
Right.
So lots of things going on up here, and so they found a lot of veterans are benefiting from TRT treatment.
Really?
And just kind of helping
them
bring things back in, calms kind of the static in your mind down, So I think that was part of where I'd kind of lost weight, because I think I was overtraining a bit. I wasn't recovering like I thought I could. And so then getting on that and just feeling much, much, much better.
Yeah.
So that's been amazing, and just feeling better. So great.
Well, yeah. And because I've never, I think I for sure overtrain.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And for me, it's such a balancing act, because I train for my mental health, really.
Yes.
And there'll be days when I'm like, I don't care if I'm injured, I gotta go do this, because I'm gonna lose my mind at work or whatever. And I'm like, and so I have this problem. I probably chronically overtrain. But I'm curious, because you've got these cool balances of you're coaching people and you're training people and you're living it and doing it at the same time.
Yeah.
And I'm interested how you draw that line, with a client. You're, obviously your job is to bring out the best in them. Yeah. And hopefully, though, not too much.
Yes.
Not to the point of injury or whatever.
Yeah.
How do you know, and I know that there's no crystal ball, but I'm just curious your approach to it, or your kind of how you handle it, that balancing act of motivating and encourage somebody versus
slow down.
Do they have low T or whatever? All these things or are they overtraining? How do you approach it, and how do you kind of use your discretion to know like how hard to push.
Kind of talk to them about, when we do our first session together and we kind of go through movements and see kind of when I just kind of as we start, kind of see what they want to work on, where they're at, what injuries they have they had surgeries, do they have plates, screws, fake joints, whatever they have, kind of let that lead us what we want to look at, and then talk about diet, nutrition, and everybody's diet's fine. They're all eating great.
Of course.
That's what everybody always says all the time. I'm like, okay, me too.
Yeah.
And then kind of let that lead where it is, and then see what kind of programming they want. Do they want me to build them a whole 12 weeks out so they can see what we're doing, or are they okay, I'll come in with a program and we just kind of, either way, we kind of fine tune it as we go. But some people you got to be like, come on, we can do a little bit more. I know we can push a little bit harder. And then other people, you're like, we don't need to do that much.
Sometimes you actually hold people back.
Yeah, you got to, let's tone it down. I want us to be able to, especially when they're just starting out. If they're just starting out into training and into fitness, you're like, we don't need to jump into 2-hour training sessions. We need to keep it where we can recover and it's recoverable for us. We got to work on that first, because today's important, but if we can't be here tomorrow,
then it's not worth it.
Today's not worth it if we're not able to train tomorrow or the next day or the next day. So bringing people back, which is easier to do one-on-one, I'd say it's harder to do in the group classes, because then you get everybody pushing everybody, which is really cool too.
It's kind of the point of a group class.
Yeah. But what I've kind of figured out there is the way I program things. I have to program things appropriately to make people do it the way I see it being done.
So that they have some individual discretion.
Yeah, and then they don't have too much where they can just go. So that's where I've started to bring in these EMOMs where we work for a minute and then we rest. Because what I found is a lot of people that have trained for a long time have a really hard time with the rest concept.
Right.
And they're like, oh, I can just keep going and get it done faster. And I'm like, that is not our point today. That is not our training stimulus today. I promise you, I will give you some workouts where we just keep going till we get done, but it's going to be way harder than this.
But today the rest is intentional.
Yeah. So I found that where I have to intentionally program rest in to make people like, okay, we're resting between sets, especially when we do, if we do a heavy day, like today we're going to do a max effort bench press. I'm going to have to remind all the younger guys that are at college age, take time between your sets, rest between your sets. Don't just like, you go, I go, you go, I go. We're going for maxes today. You go, we talk for a minute, he goes, we talk for a minute again, then everybody goes.
Right.
So we don't just keep, because we can't, when we go for a max effort bench press, we can't go again in a minute. We got to go in 2 or 3 minutes. I heard something the other day where they were talking about sprinters and the way sprinters are training, and they rest. This one coach recommends they rest. What was it? It was like a minute for every 100 meters they sprint.
Okay. Wow.
Or for every 10 meters they sprint. So if they sprint 100 meters,
every
they're resting.
10 meters.
Yeah. So if they sprint 100 meters, they're resting 10 minutes.
Before their next sprint.
And they're not doing that. And this is like high level, top level sprinters. This is not like, high school or junior high school athletes.
Right.
The practice would take far
That's
too
wild
long.
though, because that seems excessive.
Yeah,
but
it does. But then you think about it, you're like at that top level, elite level of sprinting, they probably don't need that many sprint intervals to keep that
and
speed.
Honestly, probably the recovery is just as important.
It's the diminishing returns there where they're like getting faster, so they want every...
And you have a higher level of training.
Yeah,
like
so they want...
effort is...
Yeah, so they want every effort to be the same up until that very last. So if they run 8 intervals, number 1 and number 8 are just as fast.
Exactly.
If not getting faster at 8.
Which would, and that's why the extended... the extended recovery.
Yeah.
Wild.
Yeah.
Okay, but going back to the question though, the balance of strength and endurance.
Yeah.
Is there one? Like, is there a perfect?
You're always going to give from one to take to the other.
Right.
You always got to, and it just depends on, some people are really good at finding that balance and being pretty darn good at both, but you're always going to give from one for the other.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of guys out there that can do, they'll do that 500-pound deadlift and then a sub 5-minute mile.
It's wild.
Yeah.
It's wild. And that's part of my problem.
Yeah.
Like, I'll see that.
And you're like, I want to do that. I know. I was like, I want to do that. And I'm like, that sounds really painful.
Brutal.
I'm like, I'm into that.
Did you see Truett Haynes broke the pull-up record in a day?
Yeah.
Did 10,000 pull-up records in a day.
Yeah.
And then went and ran like a 2:40
I didn't see that
marathon
part.
in jeans.
Yeah. Oh, I did see that. Yeah. His hands, though, oh,
wild. But like, and those are obviously the exceptions. Like the guys that are just, freakishly strong and fast and have the endurance. Because he'll go crush 100-milers too. And I'm like, oh my goodness. But I did, when I was training for that first 100-miler, I definitely knew, like, I don't know how to explain it except for I sensed it, that I was weak. Like I
you gotta
sense that I was.
It's that recovery phase too, because when you're training that much for that long of a goal and putting in that miles, you're not really recovered to do this heavy work over here.
Right.
So it's kind of either you're going to be slower here and a little bit stronger here, or faster here and a little bit weaker here. There's always like that give and take on either end. So
and I think I'm getting close to like finding that balance. Like, I do more strength training now than I was. I'm strength training 3 times a week, at least twice a week, sometimes 3 times a week. And my mileage is a little bit lower than it used to be. And then when I'm like actually training for an ultra, I'll ramp my mileage up a little bit and, do a little bit less strength training.
But I think you'll be able to find that balance where you can dial one back and one up and down easier. And I think the main thing, we've got a lot more endurance athletes coming into the vault now through Maggie, of course, which is awesome. I think the main benefit for them is that like the tendon health and just that overall like the other bone density rather than just legs and beating things up, and just those different ranges of motion we're in. And instead of just going this way, we do a little bit of different,
both.
A little bit of both, and then just strengthening other leg muscles, like working more on hip flexors and like tibialis and other things around the knee to help with those knee, ankle, foot issues. And that kind of stuff is, I think, the big benefit for long distance runners. It's not like we want them to come in and be like, oh, we're all going to get a 500-pound deadlift, and you're going to run 100-milers faster.
But maybe we could get injured less.
Maybe our bones and our tendons are more durable for that kind of mileage because they've had a little bit of different stress put on them. So it's adding in that different stress to get better at this stress.
So I've been speaking of chronically injured, but I have my soleus and Achilles in my left leg is always a problem. Like always a problem. So I'm learning how to stretch it better and do tissue work and all that stuff. But I've started trying to be intentional about strength training it. And so I've just been putting doing the seated kettlebell,
calf raises.
And it's funny because I hate it because I feel like I'm not being productive. It's like, gosh, it's not that hard, and I'm sitting here and I'm doing it. But I actually think that it's paying off. It's anecdotal, like I might just not be injured right now. But I think I can see like the benefit of the strength happening. It's that like prehab. It's like that prehab. Instead of rehabbing, you're prehabbing it. I mean, I think it was my left Achilles and soleus. I think it was like 2020. I had a lot of the gym space. We had a big gym out in Bodo, and I was like, I'm going to try some barefoot sprint. Great plan. I'm going to do some barefoot sprinting inside. This will be great. It's not so much the acceleration, it's the slowing deceleration. Messed my Achilles and my soleus up. I couldn't jump rope or jump of any kind for quite a while. And I had to go back to like calf raises and that kind of stuff, just remediate back and strengthen everything back up, get that extra stretch in there. A lot of sled dragging, pulling the sled backwards, pulling the sled forwards, and it took me a while to like get that back where I could actually jump rope. When I first started jump roping, I started on a pad again because it still hurts. Because you needed because I needed that little bit of pad, and that's when I learned I am not a barefoot sprinter. Bad idea.
I was like, I'm gonna try this. This sounds cool, and it's pretty fun. Until you overdo it.
Until it's not.
Until you do a bunch of intervals because you're really feeling it, and you're like, oh, I messed up big time. So and sometimes you got to do those things and experiment and mess up to learn that maybe that's not the way to train.
That's not the approach.
And I would never be like, all right, we're doing barefoot sprinting today, guys. I do.
You get to be the experiment.
I do like to do stuff barefoot though. Like we do squats and deadlifts sometimes if somebody's having trouble with feeling their feet, or they come in like the hokas or something, that are like all marshmallowy and wobbly, and you can see their feet doing this when they're trying to squat. So I'll be like, if you're okay with it, let's kick the shoes off and let's put our whole foot on the floor.
For stability reasons, you do that?
Yeah. And you can because you can grip the floor more. Like your foot's not just passive on the floor, just along for the ride. It all starts there. You got to be rooted and have that active foot, and you actually push your feet into the ground and kind of corkscrew in for when you squat.
Yeah.
Like if you had a perforated paper towel, it would kind of go start to rip apart at the tip, and you build that tension into your legs as you squat, and then your knees will track out over your toes, and that keeps your knees from caving in as you're coming up. And just being really active with those feet. And I see that a lot with people. And if you ask any of them, I'm always talking about being active with our feet and squeezing with our quads and our glutes, whether we're squatting, deadlifting, overhead pressing, kettlebell swinging, bench press, whatever it is. We're always having active feet and our legs engaged.
Yeah. Fascinating.
Because it's all comes from, if you've ever done any martial arts, it's always being like rooted to the ground and stable. And so a lot of times you see people and they just kind of letting their feet, or if they're squatting, their arms are kind of doing whatever, because, we don't have a lot of coaching. Even if you go through high school sports, you go in the weight room, there's not a lot of coaching there. You're just like, grab the barbell, squat.
Right.
When I learned to squat when I was in the Navy and we were doing all that bodybuilding training, and we'd squat, we're just squatting. We didn't know.
Yeah.
And then I had a really good coach here in Durango, and he's like, squeeze down on the bar. And I'm like, okay, that sounds weird. Yeah, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
And just keeping that tension where you need to in your body makes a big difference.
Tell me some ideas. So let's say somebody's listening right now who is needing to get movement back into their life, like functionally. Mm-hmm. Like, not an athlete. I don't know, maybe for sake of conversation, they're a little bit older or they're out of shape or whatever, but somebody's wanting to start exercising just to enhance day-to-day life.
Yeah.
What would be your advice to them? Like some simple exercises or a simple approach? Like how would you start? How would you start?
Yeah, just start something. I start a lot of people with just box squats, or we squat to a bench. One of the benches, you use at the rig for bench press. We just squat to that to start off.
With no weights?
Yeah, no weights, just squatting to that. Doing lunges, if we can do lunges and get that little balance piece in there. Those are really, really good. What else? Oh, sled dragging. So we have a couple sleds back there. I brought in a smaller, lighter weight one because the other ones are huge. They're a little too heavy. And then just dragging that sled backwards. Because going backwards and pushing through the front of that knee and extending all the way through and just feeling that whole quad, pulling the toe up, get the tibialis involved, really good for balance and knee health. Because everybody, that's getting started back up, they're worried about their knees and their back.
Yep.
And I'm like, okay, well, we're going to start off simple. We'll start with some squats. We'll do some lunges, some box step-ups. We got the sled. We usually start on like the assault bike and just get kind of everything moving there, get everything kind of lubed up and just a little moving, and then start that way, and then eventually work to where we're getting down to the floor and getting back up is super important. And then maybe we work into wherever they can, if that's into pull-ups or pull downs, or we go on the machines, just kind of get something moving, and then that ultimate goal is improving that range of motion and movement and strength in whatever it is.
Right. Talk to me about, because we've talked about movement, a few times, and early in our conversation, you were talking about kind of some of your older, clients and to keep moving or to start moving again or whatever. Talk to me about movement, how important it is, and just like your philosophy on it.
Yeah, no, I think that's the key, is be able to move. Don't stop moving, because you see people all the time, and they used to be an athlete, or they did this or that, and they stopped. And now they're just kind of froze up. They don't move as well. They don't do as much, which then just compounds, and they don't want to do anything to get back to that, because now it's really hard. It hurts. Everything's hard. They're kind of shuffling. So I want to be that older guy that moves really well. Because so when I started doing the combat challenge and I was on the fire department, there was this guy, Ray Fredette, and he was 50, really old.
So old, yeah.
So old, just a really old guy. He'd retired from the Merchant Marines, and he did the combat challenge, and he was one of the fastest over 50 in the nation. Like, he was fast. And I was like, that's what I want to be like when I'm 50. Now I'm getting close. I'm like, well, I want to be better than that even. But I'm like, that's where I want to keep going, is always have that ability to move, be able to sprint, just take off, sprint. If I'm walking down the street and I want to sprint and jump on something.
Butcher it, but I saw a stat somewhere that it was absurd. It was something like 80-90% or whatever of people over 30 will never sprint again.
Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah, or haven't sprinted at all. Like,
yeah.
And you think about it, and you look around, you're like, oh, yeah, I do know a lot of people that probably haven't.
I guess it makes sense.
Sprinted. Yeah. I mean, we know a lot of people that have sprinted.
So should people go sprint?
Not right off the bat.
Okay.
Unless they want to pull their hamstrings.
Right. Yeah.
But they should start somewhere. Get in, get on the bike, get moving. The sled drags are awesome for like working up to sprinting.
Yeah.
Dragging the sled backwards, dragging the sled forwards. But like,
are you ever too old to get into shape? Like,
I don't think so.
Let's say, I don't know, somebody's never been an athlete.
Yeah.
Like somebody's never
done. Yeah. Never done anything. Yeah.
And they're old. They're 50. No,
yeah.
they're 60
they're
or
so
whatever.
Old, yeah.
But is there? I don't know. Are you ever too old to get into shape?
No, you can always. I think there's always that ability to adapt to those different stimulus. Our body's amazing that way. You give it a new stimulus, training, something, and it's going to adapt that way. Now, are they going to get to the level of somebody who's like 30 or 40? Probably not. But are they going to get better than they are? Certainly.
Yeah.
I really believe that. And I think, it's like yesterday, we were walking. Yeah, was it yesterday? Yeah, my daughter did a choir. I guess you call it a recital. I don't know. They sang the whole choir. But afterwards, we went down, got dinner at Carver's, and we're walking back. And she like jumps up on the wall at the bank. She's 10. So I was like, I'm going to jump up on the wall. Yeah. And then we jump off. And I'm like, I want to be able to do that with my grandkids and do that forever and be that, that grandpa that they're like, who's freaking grandpa is that guy jumping up on stuff?
It's so funny that you said that. So
get him down.
Literally yesterday, same day,
my
daughter's jumping off of our. It's a dual purpose toy box and coffee table in our living room.
Yeah.
And she's jumping off of it. She's 2.5 and she's like jumping as high as she can and she's landing and I'm like, oof, that looks like it hurts. Like, So I was telling my wife, I'm like, how high of a thing do you think you could jump off of? Right now? Like, do you think you could jump off the counter?
Yeah.
Whatever. Yeah. And then I'm like, now we have to try.
Yeah.
So I was making my wife walk up the stairs and then jump off to like see what the highest stair was that we could jump off and land on the ground. And actually, the only thing that held us back was the ceiling got.
It gets right.
But same thing. I'm like, we gotta do it now. I want to jump off the stairs. However old we are. Like, even though it looked so painful because she's landing all like.
Oh yeah, they just land like, and they just. But that's kind of the secret. I do it all the time, and I think we'll be at my daughter does horse shows, and I'll just jump off the side of the truck, and sometimes I get some like weird looks, like, why did he? Is he okay?
You're way too old to be doing that.
Yeah, why is he doing that? And I'll just hop down, and I'm like, it's that like absorbing that landing that you gotta. I think you don't want to lose that.
Yeah, you got to learn.
You got to be able to absorb that landing and
I think
fall
that's that idea of like movement.
Yeah.
It's like whatever. I'm gonna I've seen sometimes people too, and I've thought about maybe doing it. They race their kids every year.
Yeah.
A sprint race, and like whoever can, and then some year the kid's gonna.
Go faster.
But until then, like I'm gonna, and I thought that it'd be fun to start incorporating stuff like that. Of like, maybe my boys chase me down or whatever.
Yeah.
But the whole idea, honestly, is just like keep moving.
Yeah.
Like I don't know.
Yeah, keep playing.
Stay young forever. Yeah, keep playing. That's what it is. It's playing.
Yeah.
That's what. So this summer for me was really fun because I feel like I had balanced the strength training, the endurance training. I wasn't injured finally.
Yeah.
I was in ultra marathon shape like the whole summer.
Yeah.
But I was never like really, really pushing it too far.
Yeah.
And I was telling my wife, I'm like, it's wild. Like the mountains have become fun.
Yeah.
Like I can go play in them.
Yeah.
Like such a different mindset over like, dreading the hill.
Yeah.
Or like, oh, that one's got a lot of vertical or, whatever.
You're like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, it's like, no, it's great. Yeah. Like I'm starting to look for the next challenge of like, how high can I go today? Or like how many sky step laps could I do?
Yeah. Yeah. What can I do?
But I love that you use that word of keep playing.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of, when we go hunting, we go bow hunting, and I don't know if we do it on purpose, my buddy and I, but we always find the hardest, steepest thing to go up.
Yeah.
And I'm like, most people would probably have gone a different way, but we're like, we want to go up there, but it looks like you could go, but we're just going to go straight. We're just going to go straight. And it's just, and the places you find, the things you see, and just the experience you have by just being able to just go, I'm going to just go straight up that.
Isn't it
and see what you find.
It's freeing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? To like treat yourself in a way in which you can go do stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like that's what I have found is that being in shape for me and being healthy, one, the primary reason for it's been my mental health, which it's helped exponentially. But the second one of it is it's freeing.
Yeah.
Like it feels so nice to know that I can climb that mountain.
Yeah.
Or that I could carry the thing.
Yeah.
You know, or whatever. My wife needs help with, like I'll figure it out. Like I'm strong enough, or I can last long. I'm endurance enough, you know, to carry my kids through the airport all day or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you know, but it's I don't know, it's such a rewarding state to be in where you know that you're capable of
you're like I
that.
can get myself out of this situation.
Exactly. Like if all hell broke loose, at least I could walk home.
Yeah, because nothing's scarier than being like, I don't know if I could get out of this.
How would I figure that out? Yeah. Like I saw a thing in, you know, whatever, but I saw a thing on social media, and it was like a stroller got away from somebody. And they were falling.
Yeah,
and it was like,
I saw that one. Yeah.
You know, like how scary of a moment that would be to not be able to physically.
Yeah, you can't do it.
Solve the problem.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, there's all these different levels to it, but the mental component of me for sure, and also my ability to like be a good dad and like play with the kids and go on adventures.
Have that energy, and if they want to go jump on the trampoline,
no problem.
Like they love going to the or our youngest does going to the Fly High.
Yeah, it's great
trampoline park down there. And like I'll look
Someone
around
needs to open one up here.
And I know. I'm like the only dad out here jumping around. Like I like to jump over the big blocks on top of them, like jump and roll and like.
Right. My kids will.
My wife's like, oh my God, would you stop?
You're gonna get hurt.
Yeah, she's like, you're gonna get hurt. These people are not impressed. You're breaking the rules.
Right. Yeah, you're in trouble. You're way too old for this.
Yeah.
No, I do the same thing. I'll go try to do I'll still do backflips on our trampoline, and they're not nearly as coordinated as they used to be. And, you know, there's definitely a risk of injury there, but it's just fun to be able to play.
Yeah.
That got me excited. The word you used there.
Yeah.
Keeping it fun.
Well, and I want to be able to do that when they have kids.
Right.
With my grandkids, and just be able to always do things.
Keep moving. Yeah.
Because I've just seen so many people that I've known over the years as they get older, and you're just like, oh, you used to be so fun.
Right.
You could do stuff. Now you can't.
Now you can't. Yeah.
And that's.
But it's not too late.
Yeah. No.
Right?
Yeah. You can always start. My dad, he'd gained when he was working for the Zincs out at their ranch, and when he stopped, he just kind of was like, I have worked for the last like 50, 60 years or whatever. I'm just going to hang out for a while. And then he's like, all of a sudden he's like, oh crap, I gained a lot of weight. So he's been getting that weight back down. I gave him some bands and some different stuff to do in the garage, and it's making a big difference. And he's like, can't do that, because he got to where it was hard to like get on and off his motorcycle, and he loves riding his motorcycles.
Yeah, see, isn't that interesting?
And he's like, oh yeah, maybe I can't just hang out and not do anything. But you go from, I think that's what happens too, is you go from an active work lifestyle to then you retire and you based all your physical activity around work.
Yeah.
And now you're like, oh, I don't work. Because I know people all the time are like, oh, those guys are training all the time. They're always in the gym. Or, it's because you got to have that piece and continue that on for life.
Right.
You don't want to have to start that later.
It's like,
it's going to be much harder.
Oh, yeah. I think it's Jordan Peterson, but there's a quote about like, you think that you want to sit on the beach and drink margaritas, but you don't.
No.
Like that would be the most miserable life.
Yeah.
And there's such an interesting dilemma of that, right? It's like you got to do the hard thing now to enjoy the other thing later.
And continue to do hard things.
Like if you just picked the easy thing, you'd be miserable.
Yeah.
Well, it's so weird that we're wired like that.
Yeah.
But to your point, if you continue to pick the hard thing, it's why I Murph every Monday. Because it's the hardest worktown I know. And I do it every Monday to set the tone for the week. And it's just like...
Your week can only go up from there.
It's only going to go up. I promise you, the meeting's not going to be harder. But it's a fascinating thing that like we have to keep doing. You have to continually do hard things to have fun, to like feel alive.
Yeah, always
I wish that wasn't
yourself.
the case, but it's so the case.
Yeah.
Now, just this weekend, I was even telling my wife, I'm like, gosh, dang it. I feel like I got to find another 100-miler. Like, and I do. I've got to find another 100-miler. Like, I've got to find another enormous challenge.
Yeah, to train. Yeah.
And I hate that.
Yeah. Well, and it helps.
I'm like stoked on it.
I don't know. It it helps focus your training.
Yeah.
You've got something to go for, so it adds just that little bit more fun.
Yeah.
Into that training.
And there's an intentionality behind it, which helps for sure.
Yeah.
If I don't have a race signed up or a thing, it's hard to to do the long run or
you're like, well, I'm not really got anything big coming up. Yeah, I could cut that in half or in quarter.
But it's crazy because we have to be in pursuit of stuff. And it's like you said, that constant hard thing. Yeah. I mean, if you found that to be true in your life, you have to be doing
pursuing
hard stuff.
Something. Yeah, and I've always got, I did some strongman competitions, so training for those is always super fun. And then just, CrossFit, there's always kind of a focus on, the Open's coming up or this or that's coming up. And now my focus is kind of on, I like testing the workouts and making the programming that I have for all we've done. We did a 12-week squat, bench, and deadlift. We just finished a 12-week strength and Olympic lifting cycle, and now we just started a 12-week strength and conditioning cycle, which is really fun for me to test because I love those workouts that are just like, you're like, that was just it was hard, but I like to have the purpose behind that. Yeah. It wasn't just hard just to be hard.
Right.
Sometimes
hard
that's
for a reason.
Yeah, sometimes that's fun too. Like I was telling, Wyatt that works at the fitness club, the other day I did cable flies and I had this idea. I was like, I'm just going to start at the bottom setting and I'm going to go each pin all the way up to the top setting and have adjustment on the cable thing. It turns out there's 10 of those. And so I did 10 sets with 50 on each side. Yeah, the last 3 sets were really hard. But I was like, well, that was just kind of a fun random challenge to do. Like, I'm going to try that. And then you start into it and you're like, ooh, what did I get into here? Like, don't count how many are left.
Right.
So, like, stuff like that. But right now, my main focus is designing that programming and kind of testing it, fine-tuning it, making sure it's doing what I want it to do for everybody else. And it's going to get us there, which I think people appreciate, not just being thrown like,
right, like you've been there.
Yeah, I did this, like last week's EMOM. I was like, I did this one. Yes, it is hard. And I did it again right before I coached it, just to make sure I remembered. And it was, I don't know, it was a really enjoyable one.
Right. Do you seek out hard things outside of outside of physical fitness? Or do you think it's usually a physical?
A lot of physical things, but in addition to, so I manage the Purgatory Metro District. We're building a giant brand new wastewater treatment plant right now for like $25 million. Nothing's cheap anymore.
Right.
So I do that, but then I also run my own small utility management business and do water and wastewater treatment through that as well. So I've got a lot of stuff. I do a semi-occasional newsletter.
Yeah?
Like every few months occasional.
Right on. Yeah.
So I do that, and I kind of, as ideas hit me of topics I want to expand on, I'll throw those in there and just kind of start typing it out and then build on that idea and then send it out and print it out. I've got a few of the people at the gym that see it when it comes out semi-occasionally. And so I do that. It's due diligence performance. And I kind of came up with that idea based on, we have to do our diligence to keep ourselves moving and active forever.
Yeah.
Because it was came out of the idea. I did a talk at the Special District Association conference in Keystone. So that's like fire departments, library districts, metro districts, like we are Purgatory, water, sanitation, cemetery, there's a bunch of those, road districts. And so there's a big association in Colorado, has a conference in Keystone every September. Beautiful spot to have to go for a conference.
Yeah.
And so I did a talk up there on health, fitness, and longevity for the working professional, kind of thinking like people in the offices in that industry don't get out of the office very much. They're not really into the physical world. We're pretty lucky down here where we are in Durango that no matter what job you have, you're probably running, biking, skiing, lifting, something, hiking outdoors, something is involved at some point with that.
Best. Like, and I get to go on like real trail runs from my office.
Yeah, we're pretty spoiled here. Like,
the best.
My office is above the Nordic Center, so Nordic skiing is I can go downstairs and get whatever equipment and go right out. When there's no snow right now, so it's closed. But I'm going to that conference. I just looked around and I'm like, wow, a lot of these people don't have that opportunity. So I brought up presenting on that idea and kind of went through like, how can you make healthy choices when you go to like Starbucks and, you throw up there like the mocha cream, whipped cream, fancy looking thing. And then I threw up the amount of calories And I was like, oh, is anybody going to come to this? Yeah, it was standing room only.
It was
packed.
I'm
It was
sure.
packed. And as I threw that up there and I turned around and looked at the crowd, and like all the ladies in the front row were like, like just a collective gasp, like, oh my God, I'm getting like half my daily calories from the coffee drink I get every morning.
From a liquid dessert.
Yeah, so kind of brought that up, and then how to just get out of your office, go for a walk, get 10 minutes every hour, get up, walk around the office, do something. So talking about that stuff, so that's where came up with that due diligence performance, because we have to, in that professional world, you have to do your diligence whenever you review a contract or whatever. So
doing that to ourselves.
We have to do that for ourselves too.
Brilliant.
So that's where I write all my programming out of and everything, and put that together. But yeah, that's kind of my focus right now, is that. And I'd love to find, like, if there was a cool strongman event close by, that'd be fun, because those are just fun, carrying around stones and kegs and
have you looked into
heavy
High Rocks?
stuff. Yeah.
I don't even know if I'm pronouncing it right. But
I think so, yeah. Those look crazy.
It looks intriguing to me.
Yeah.
Like, I think that I could do decent for something that combines strength and endurance.
Yeah.
Like,
I think that would be fun.
I'm not strong, and I'm middle of the pack endurance-wise.
Yeah.
But in terms of like the two, I have more of both than most.
Yeah.
Less of each than everyone. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
yeah,
Like, combined.
Yeah.
So it's intrigued me. I've looked at those, like, thinking that that'd be kind of fun.
I'm like, that looks pretty. Yeah.
And I would like it because I would have to train specifically for it.
Yeah.
Which it would. Speaking of, like,
it gives you a specific
plateaus and shocking the system or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, I don't remember the last time I did an extended farmer's carry or all the other things that are in there. So I don't know. I've been looking at one of those too.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, those look pretty fun. And then we're actually doing a Spartan race up in Colorado Springs.
Oh, those would be. Those look way.
That looks pretty fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna have fun with that. I'm like, I love that obstacle course stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I've never done one of those either, and I think one of those would be way.
Yeah.
Fun.
When we did the obstacle course in boot camp, I was like, this is the coolest thing we've done so far.
Speaking of playing,
I was like, this is awesome. I'm like, this is so cool. And everybody, like, there was a couple that me and another guy from Colorado, we both were like, this is awesome. Because otherwise we were going to the, like, indoor track. We're in Great Lakes, Illinois in February. It's freezing out.
Right.
So we're indoor in the track, and we'd get done running the mile or whatever we were going to run, and we'd keep doing laps so we didn't get detrained. But then we got to that obstacle course, and then the other fun thing we did was, like, the shipboard stuff and, like, shipboard firefighting. So
I don't know what that is.
So basically, when you're out on a destroyer, out on the ocean, you are the security force, you are the firefighting force, you are everything.
Right.
So we did a training. Everybody goes through it in boot camp. You do shipboard firefighting training, how to go in, and it's the same thing, bunker gear, SCBAs. We had these older style ones that I can't remember what they're called, but they have, like, this canister that you, like, pop in there, and it's chemicals that make oxygen. Super weird.
Interesting.
You're like, really? You're like, those chemicals are making
Allegedly.
okay. You're like, okay, sure. But all the ships had SCBAs, just the same Scott packs we had when I was on the fire department.
Yeah.
So what was cool is when we did that, they were amazed how fast I could get my bunker gear on. I was like, I practiced this a lot, actually. Yeah. And so that was fun. But then doing that, different than like a house fire or wildland fire environment, you're in like a ship, metal object. And then the other part of that is you'd go in and you'd have like a pipe that was leaking, and he'd go in and do damage control on that, and like pound a dowel in there and wrap it up and like try to stop the leak. So that stuff I like that kind of those kind of challenges.
Right.
Like, kind of a mental puzzle, kind of physical. A
little bit of both.
Like a little fire, a little water, that crazy stuff.
Yeah. What's next for you on the horizon in terms of your coaching and your training? Goals? Like, where are you headed?
Trying to grow the coaching more, get some more personal clients. I think I really want to start working kind of with guys in our age group that want to get back in shape. Maybe they were athletes or they've had an injury, something kind of set them back. But I just want to help guys get back to being active, having fun, playing. If they've got kids, being able to get out and play with their kids, and and just that mental piece that comes along with that is a huge, huge difference for people. I think that's amazing.
Yeah.
So like in September, I went down to Dallas. Do you know who Steve Weatherford is?
No.
He was a punter in the NFL. I think he was for the Giants. I should know that. But he was fittest in the NFL for couple years as a punter. Huge. Does not look like your typical punter.
Right.
Like your typical punter.
And to be the fittest in the NFL is no joke.
As a punter. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And yeah, your typical punter looks more like us than like
Right.
he looks more like a linebacker or like a receiver. So
Right.
like he's a big dude. So went down to his Champions of Christ ministry in Dallas and did a whole launch pad there, a whole men's group thing, and lots of cool stuff. It was day and a half felt like a week.
Oh yeah.
It was pretty intense. We did like 1,000 lunges kind of right after all the morning introductions and everything, and that was and you get partnered up with somebody, and it comes back to that, like, how do you encourage somebody? What I found there was the hardest part of encouraging somebody is if they're not really open to
being encouraged,
to not necessarily to being encouraged, but being helped. Like you do 1,000 lunges, and I'm like, oh, I love lunges. I'll do 1,000 lunges all day long. I'm like, this isn't hard. The hard part for me was that regulating myself to slow down, because I just wanted to like
get it done,
take off and get it done. And my partner just had knee surgery, so he had a big knee brace on. His other leg wasn't great, and so trying to help encourage him, but help him realize like, hey, it's okay to reach out for help when you need it. So I feel like that's what I like to do is like, hey guys, it's okay to reach out when you need help getting your fitness back, reaching your fitness goals. You don't just need to come into the gym and just kind of do the machines and do the typical bro split and kind of go through the motions and feel really good for the first month, and then you kind of hit plateau, and then you just kind of fade out because you're like, well, that didn't do what I wanted. I didn't get what I wanted. I want to help guys get that next level of training and find some goals, some things to go for, and bringing in all the different stuff I've done, the CrossFit, the strongman, the powerlifting, like from skiing, running, bringing all that into one thing just to build that variety and keep it exciting for people. Because that's what I like about it. Like if I get bored with squat, bench, and deadlift, I'm like, oh, I got stones at the house. I'll go pick up the stones or the yoke.
Else.
And it's just those different variable things. And it's all those hard things, but kind of in an enjoyable way.
Right.
Maybe there's something. Maybe I have a different switch in my brain that I think, handling concrete stones is enjoyable.
No, it's like we talked about. You got to do the hard things to have the enjoyable, to make it fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. Eric, thank you so much.
Yeah,
this has been so much fun, and it's so cool to see. Well, it's cool. Like I mentioned, it's so cool to see like you coaching it and training it and living it.
Yeah.
And like these simultaneous stories. Being told and developing. And I love that idea of, being open to people asking for help, and keeping it fun, all that stuff. So anyway, I just want to thank you so much for obviously giving me some of your time and like sharing some of your perspective, but it's a breath of fresh air in terms of like how you're bringing that to the world and in your coaching and in your training and all of that stuff. And I don't know, keeping it fun, man.
Well,
that's what it's all about. So I've got I told you this before. It's supposed to be a surprise, but
I'm so surprised.
Yeah, wow. No,
oh my God.
Because
awesome.
Because you really are inspiring by example, even if you are an old guy, almost 50 or whatever. But no, honestly, it's cool to see. Like I said, you've got those balances of like living it and teaching it, which is inspiring by example.
I think that's the most important thing is you can't teach it and then not do it.
Exactly.
You got to do both.
Yeah.
You got to inspire by example.
So thank you for doing both.
Always leading from the front, I guess.
Exactly.
I've always had that philosophy of I'm doing this, I'm going to show you how to do this, and I'm going to do it, and we're going to do it together, and we're always going to, everywhere I've been.
And we're going to grow together.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Eric, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks, man.